Hello, young math Padawans. It's Mrs. Angel with today's lesson on solving equations with variables on both sides. Our goal here will be to use the properties of quality to take an equation that has a lot of terms, get it down to a single term and a single term, so that the equation itself is pretty easy to solve. So let's go ahead and grab your notes and let's get started. Example 1, 5x equals 14 minus 2x. So if you would like to try this example on your own, go ahead and do so now. I'm going to start by putting the line down the middle of my equal sign. And then again, my goal is to get it down to a single term and a single term. So what's standing out to me is that I have two terms on the right, meaning one of these two terms has got to go. I have to make a zero term out of one of them. What's also standing out to me is that the term on the left has a variable. So I'm thinking if I try to make a zero term out of this 14, it's probably not going to work because I can't combine a variable term and a constant. So let's try instead to make a zero term out of this negative 2x. And I do highlight that because the subtraction sign is equivalent to adding a negative. So when we look at that term, we're thinking of it as a negative 2x. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and add 2x to both sides. That creates a zero term, which now I do believe we've met our goal because 5x plus 2x is 7x. And 14 minus 0 is 14. So if you look, we have now met our goal. We have a single term on the left, 7x, and we have a single term on the right, 14. Why did we want to do that? Because now it's fairly simple to solve. We're just going to divide both sides by 7. That creates a big one factor. And now we're left with x equals 2. Let's do a quick check just to be sure. 5 times 2 equals 14 minus 2 times 2. I always check my work, by the way. 5 times 2 is 10, and 14 minus 4, and yep, 14 minus 4 is 10. So we know that 2 is the correct solution. Let's take a look at another example that's a little bit tougher. Okay, here is example 2. 8x minus 4 equals negative 2 plus 6x. As always, if you would like to try to do this on your own, go ahead and do so now. Go through it. So again, first thing I'm going to do is put the line down the middle of my equal sign. So here's what I noticed. The left side of the equation has two terms, but the right side of the equation also has two terms. So that means I'm going to have to create zero terms twice. I'm going to have to do it with one of these on the left and one of these on the right. Now, you could technically do this 4 different ways. If you notice, we have a combination here of variable terms, 8x, and a positive 6x, and integer terms of a negative 4 and a negative 2. So you have 4 possible options. You could subtract 8x from both sides, add 4 to both sides, add 2 to both sides, or subtract 6x from both sides, because all of those would create zero terms out of one of these. Now, personally, I prefer to create a zero term out of the variable first, because what that does is it collects all of your variables to one side. With that in mind, I also try to avoid working with negatives. In other words, I wouldn't come to this equation and just subtract 8x from both sides, because that would create a negative term, and even though that's totally fine, more mistakes happen with negatives. So I actually think about this ahead of time, and I'm going, all right, if I'm going to create a zero term out of these variables, I'm going to do it with 6x. I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides, because that creates a zero term, but now 8x minus 6x is a positive 2x, and that's a much simpler equation. So what did I just do? I have now gotten the right side of the equation down to a single term, but the left side of the equation still has two terms. So noticing that the right side is an integer negative 2, I'm going to make a zero term out of the negative 4. Add 4 to both sides, zero term. And now I'm down to 2x equals 2, and look at that, I have accomplished my goal. I am down to a single term on the left, 2x, and a single term on the right, 2. Why was that important? It's a lot simpler to solve now. Divide both sides by 2, because that creates a big one factor, and our final solution here is x equals 1. Let's do a quick check. 8 times 1 minus 4 equals negative 2 plus 6 times 1. 8 times 1 is 8, minus 4 is 4, and negative 2, let's see, 6 times 1 is 6, negative 2 plus 6 is also 4, so I know that x equals 1 is the correct solution to this equation. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap before you leave and start working on problems on your own. Number 1, the goal is to use the properties of equality, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, mostly addition and subtraction, to create an equation that has one term on both sides. If you can get it down to a single term and a single term, your work's going to be pretty simple from there. If you have the option, please try to create a zero term using the variables first. That's just an option, but it's, again, what I like to do. I like to collect my variables to one side. And again, it's always probably a good idea to avoid those negative coefficients. There's usually a way to avoid negatives. I suggest going in that direction. Finally, and most importantly, make sure that you're trusting your work as you go along. As long as you're using the properties of equality correctly, you really can't go wrong. And always, 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 always check your solution, because that's how you know that you actually did all of that work correctly. So that's it for today's lesson. I will see you next time.